Alright, it's laundry time, laundry time. Fair.
You want to be good at Football Manager? This is the most compact video I could possibly make, covering every little thing that's going to actually make you good at Football Manager. So you can, 1, stop getting fired or sacked, as some of you might say. 2, stop getting made fun of by your friends. And 3, feel a sense of achievement while your virtual team wins trophies that it could never conceivably win in real life. Because those 3 reasons, those are why we're here. I've taken the liberty of doing what I literally always do, and I've broken this down into 4 sections. There are 4 phases to being good at Football Manager: tactics, people, scouting, and morale. We will be starting with tactics. Now, this is something that I feel like I'm an authority on, particularly in FM22. We won the Football Manager Streamer Showdown once. We made it to the final the next time. And in the network save, where we're playing 3 of the other biggest Football Manager YouTubers, we're in first out of the 4 of them. So things are going pretty well tactic-wise right now. But if you'll take a journey to the tactics section of your game on what is my Twitch save, we're in Austria, fun stuff. If you want to see any of that stuff, there's links in the description. You know how the internet works. You can go down and check it out. We have a tactic, and what I'm going to tell you off the top is that this tactic is probably not the single greatest tactic anybody has ever come up with on Football Manager. And that also doesn't matter, because the key to a tactic and being good at tactics in Football Manager is making sure that you can cover 4 phases of the game. The first phase is your attack. What does your sustained attack look like? Who ends up where? This is when you have the ball for a significant amount of time. It gives you the opportunity for all of your players to get into the position that they were eventually going to get to. If you have fullbacks in attack, they're going to end up all the way up here because they have get further forward. If you have a Metsala, they're going to end up in the channel. When you have that sustained offensive pressure, you know what your team is going to look like. Keys to this is you don't want it to be too defensive, because you want to have enough players making runs and players in different spots to make passes and score goals. But if it's too offensive, you could be exposed to one of the other phases of a tactic. The second obvious phase of a tactic is what your team looks like in settled defense. This is what your team's going to look like when the other team has the ball for a long time. Where do guys end up? Who follows the run down the wing? Who's going to drop in and fill for a center back when they have to move? Which one of your midfielders is going to do that? Who's going to track a run, or are they going to leave the run because they are mandated to stay further up the field? Then there's phases 3 and 4. These are the transition phases. What does your transition offense look like? And what does your transition defense look like? This is your counter and your counter-proofness. This is where position is almost more important than role. So my counter punch, my countering ability is fantastic with this tactic, because I have 2 advanced forwards at the top, which means even when we have the ball, these dudes are hanging out next to the opposing center backs. And once we get the ball, it's go time. And if we get the ball in a favorable spot, those 2 guys are already up there, and we have a 3rd person running with the ball or looking to make a pass right in behind them. We pay for this, though, because we have 1 less player that's able to help out with a lot of things. But our 3rd phase of the game, our attacking transition phase, is fantastic. The 4th phase, that defensive transition, this is where your players are going to be and how quickly they are going to be able to become positionally responsible. If you have a tactic that is balanced between these 4 things and does not have an obvious weakness in any one of those 4 phases, you can win any competition in Football Manager. And it might sound complicated to think about that sort of stuff, but something that somebody told me a long time ago when I was getting into Football Manager for the first time still holds. When you see this, this is your defense. The roles determine what your sustained offense looks like, and how severe those roles are compared to the position will determine what your transition looks like. Those are very loaded 2 sentences. Hopefully they make sense. If they don't, we have literally the world's biggest Football Manager Discord. You can join it down in the description with all the other stuff I mentioned. There's like a whole tactics section where you can talk about this stuff. That obviously doesn't cover everything. That's just the construction of your overall tactic. So I'm going to give you a couple of things to look out for that could be pitfalls. 1, a lower back line does not necessarily mean a better defense. You need specific types of players, and you need to be able to keep them from sieging you the entire game. Focusing to a specific area of the field will really wear those players out. It's an emphasis in FM22 to make stamina harder to maintain throughout a game. If you keep handing the ball to Mo Salah every time, he's gonna get tired. And unless you're trying to play the slowest tiki-taka system anybody's ever seen, have counter on at all times. It's gonna help you in that 3rd phase of the tactical game. Now it's time to move on to the next section. Still tactics. You got baited. It's okay. Come back next time. You'll be better. Every tactic I have ever made has 3 versions of it. I have the version that I switch to when I need goals. I have the version I switch to when I need to stop goals. And I have the version that I'm on if I don't know exactly what I need. Specifically for the tactic I use with Floridsdorfer, I switch to this when I need more goals, and this when I am absolutely desperate for goals. I switch to this when I don't know what I need. I could need goals, but I also need to be defensively sound. And I switch to this when I need to see out a game. The roles will change a little bit, obviously, when I make those tweaks, but positionally, all of these guys can do those things, and I have a bunch of people on the bench that can do those things. It's very good to have 3 similar tactics that can be defensively responsible, very aggressive, and somewhere in the middle. One exact tactic every single time is never always going to be the best option. But I mentioned having players that are good for what you're trying to do. Well, that is actually section number 2. You're not being baited. Let's go. Section number 2 with the players. This is about finding the right players to help you succeed. This is about player recruitment, which in my opinion is the single most important thing in the game. And for a long time, I wasn't even that confident in my tactical ability. I've had to study it and test it a lot. The way that you can win the game and succeed and do tremendous things is identifying the right players and bringing them in. Because an average tactic with players that perfectly are able to execute it beats a good tactic with players that aren't right for the system, like every time. But just as an example, if I'm playing this system with 2 advanced forwards, neither of these forwards can be slow, and they have to be able to work off the ball because they are not going to be on the ball a whole lot because they're advanced forwards pressing against the back line. So we have recruited a whole collection of strikers that have great athleticism, that have the ability off the ball in what I call the Holy Trinity: dribbling, finishing, first touch. And you see that we have replicated that with the different strikers that we've signed. This is a very easy type of striker to find. It is not a hard thing to find, but it is the right thing for us to find. There are other things for strikers in this position like passing and vision that I would love to have, but aren't necessary for them to be able to execute this job. Now, the 2 playmaker spots, which I have 2 playmakers in the middle, or sometimes if they start running into each other because we have too much possession, we'll go with an attacking midfielder up here so that they can make more aggressive runs. But out of those 2 spots, you do need first touch, passing, vision, decision making, people that can dictate the tempo of a game, and the athleticism is secondary. Completely different type of midfielder than the guys that I like to have on the outside, where you don't have passing that is nearly as great, but you've got athleticism, touch, dribbling. Vision's gravy. I mean, he has 16 vision, but that's not why we signed him. We signed him because he's somebody that can push the ball up the outside and is going to be able to get into favorable positions. Not going to have the ball as much. Or Ilko, a more defensively sound but technically proficient and intelligent midfielder who kind of just eats space and does it well. I do not play Sestak or Ilko in Brody or Sunday Madu's positions. I use Brody and Sunday Madu and Owen Vanderhorst, who's also kind of out of the same mold, very interchangeably, but I don't put them in the wide positions. It's entirely different for me. Another position where this is very evident is the fullback position, because anything from a fullback on defend, which you can use to squeeze unathletic center backs out to the wide areas so that they can help you out defensively, to something like a complete wingback on attack, you're talking about 2 players that couldn't possibly be more different. I mean, just look at Jean Rogel. He's got 8 marking, he has 8 tackling, and even though his positioning is good, so he's able to get to the right spot and is not a total defensive liability, he's all offense. Well, on the left side, Martin Simcoe is a lot more defense. And so I have to adjust my tactic with a Metsala on the left so that I can get somebody in the flank, because I know I can't trust Simcoe to be that influence, where I can trust San Rogel to be that influence outside of Pavel Ilko. So I have adjusted my tactic to my personnel. What you're probably thinking is, if you design a system that works and you build a team that works in a system, then you're going to miss out on a lot of good players because you'll find good players that don't necessarily fit your system. So what I've shown here is that I've kind of done both. Martin Simcoe and his running mate, Bobby Smith at left back, neither one is a great wing back, but they were the 2 best left backs that I could find through scouting. And so I signed both of them and found a way to design a tactic that fit what they could do best, which is defend and provide an outlet option as kind of a deeper passing fullback. On the right side, I found Nicholas Lima, who's very athletic and is able to push up the wing. And I also found, finally, a wingback in San Rogel. Ideally in this formation, both wingbacks are incredibly forward, incredibly creative, and wreaking havoc on the opposing team. But that's not what I had. I only landed one of them. So I tailored the tactic to put them in a position to succeed. In other instances, you find a player who's great, like Manuel Nira, who plays as a natural winger, and you decide that he actually has the ability, nice, same ability as Sestak in a lot of ways, the Metsala on the left side, to play that position. So we've trained him into our tactic because we do not want to change out of this tactic. It has been working for us, but we wanted to make use of this amazing young player that we were able to find. Then, of course, there's the third part where we really only signed someone like Vince Brody because even though he probably isn't going to improve a ton, he fits our system and he can absolutely ping a ball. And we play a system where the fact that he can't move really or play too much defense doesn't matter. And so he's good value for us. He fits a role and covers our deficiencies. But here, let me design a flow for you. So here is a flow. We'll build a chart. Tom? Thank you. So from the chart, you start your save, and then you start signing the best players that you can. That's something that I would always recommend. The best players you can find, buy them. Then design, at this point, a tactic to fit those great players that you've spent the first year of your save signing. And then over time, you will settle into a tactic that is winning for you, the type of balanced tactic that's utilizing your players well, and you are succeeding. And then after that starts succeeding for a while, you'll hit a point where your whole roster is kind of built to be around that tactic, and you start signing players for the system instead of just signing great players. So you make your way along that timeline, and that's usually how it goes. But the finding of these players is one of the 4 tenets of the entire game's scouting. A lot of people will leave this up to chance, or they won't pay attention to scouting, or you play with attribute masking off, which if you do play with attribute masking off, which means you can see everybody's attributes in the whole world, cool. Have fun. We're on the network save, that's what we're doing. It's a video game. Do whatever the heck you want. But to me, scouting is one of the core parts of Football Manager in the entire experience. And a lot of people play with attribute masking on, the fog of war. So this is for you. You're going to want to use scouting to find 3 things. You're looking for wonder kids, you are looking for a database of players that are going to be able to help your team, and you're looking for potential loanees. We've covered in this video, that's going to be right up there, the best way to set up your scouts. We ran a bunch of tests. It's nation scouting. You set up nation scouting looking for wonder kids with scouts that can speak the language there, and you will have great results. What that video doesn't cover is the end of contract stuff, the loan stuff. If you want to look for end of contract players, that is up here. You go to transfer type, end of contract, and then you could honestly do like the continent of Europe. It will still be a productive scouting mission, especially if you have some sort of European scout who's got knowledge of a couple of nations. They'll go in there right away. If you have specific rules for your country, i.e. your lower league England, you can scout just the nation of England for end of contract players. And then when you find them, you want to create short lists so that you can file them away. These are normally the short lists that I will have in every save. So they come through your scouting center, you find this person. You go to your short list, you go to the right side, and then you click the drop down and you click new short list. You can just type it in whatever the heck you want, doesn't matter. As long as you have an end of contract, future players, loan players, the maybes, and the targets. So let's say this person's contract is running out, and so we want to right click, and then we'll just add them to the end of contract for a year. And then once that contract wave is done, say you get to June 31st and everybody's contract expires, you go to end of contract, general info, and you look up everybody without a club, and then you offer them a trial, and that's it. Right click, transfer, and there will be an option to offer trial right there. If you're early in a save and not in a top league, that is the single best way to find players in the entire game. Have a scout or 2 looking into contract players and create this database. You have 1 scout looking for loans, preferably in just a couple of the top leagues in Europe, so that you can find players that would be interested in you that are also good. And the rest looking for wonder kids that you either add to your targets list if you feel like you can get them soon or really want to keep an eye on them, or the futures list so that you don't lose them forever. And then any other players that agents recommend or what have you that come through your scouting center that look like they could be good enough, add them to the maybes. And here's why. If you have 110 players in your maybe shortlist, that would be 10 players for every position on the field. And you get an amazing offer from Man United. They just come kicking the door in and they're like, we're going to sue you if you don't sell us this player. And you go, okay, cool. And so you sell that player off to Man United. You just them out there. Then you can go to this list and find somebody at that position that you can bring in. That's the point of the maybes list. It is this backup depository of a bunch of players you know would be able to play for your team or could play for your team, and you go and filter through it once that player unexpectedly goes. You don't skip a beat, you make a bunch of money. You don't have to sweat over it. And all of that will make scouting incredibly comfortable instead of incredibly stress-inducing. The final section will be the shortest, but it will also be arguably the most important. The one that sneaks up on everybody, and that is the morale. Morale, club atmosphere, the hidden giant in Football Manager that if you were just starting out, doesn't seem very important. It is. You can have a great tactic and great players if they hate you, if they hate each other, and if they're not having a good time, they will lose every time. It's a snowball effect. Once it starts going bad, it gets harder and harder to fix it. I have made a bunch of videos about morale. I recommend checking them all out if you start to have issues with it. But in essence, you need 3 things. 1, don't make a promise that you cannot verifiably keep. I.e., I'm going to give you more playing time and I'm actually going to do it. We're going to win this thing, or you're going to leave and that's fine, or I'm going to sell you, or something very concrete. Do not go, oh, I'm going to improve the coaching staff, or I'm going to bring in one of your friends or whatever. You can keep those promises, but it's not concrete. It's much harder to do. Number 2, track playing time. Don't give people playing time that you don't think you can uphold, and freaking keep track of it. It takes 5 seconds to check this. Go to squad, drop down, and then go to the playing time view. You can see agreed playing time next to actual playing time. If you see a player who has less actual playing time than their agreed playing time, click on that player, go to overview, and go to happiness. If they don't have a strong opinion about their playing time at the present, that's fine. They're not going to be worried about it. If they do have an issue with it, then you can nip it in the bud, give them an extra game or 2 before they come to you and force you to promise that they will get more game time, because that can become a slippery slope. However, if you do fail the first time on a playing time promise, there is always the option to, hey, look, we're going to play you more in the future. My bad. Always click that one. It will literally reset the promise and you'll have a second shot to give them enough playing time. It can also buy you time to the end of the season if you just want to avoid the huge issue to the dynamics and then deal with them being angry in the offseason. That's perfectly fine. 3, take every opportunity to boost players' morale and keep the locker room atmosphere up. This includes praising them after good matches, yelling at them after bad matches when it comes to their match rating, and every week when you get a training report, go to each player that got at least a 7.75 and click on each one and praise them. The button will pop up in the top right corner. It's just not there in my save right now, and I'm not allowed to hit continue unless I'm streaming. So here's me doing it from the network save literally earlier today. If you have a balanced tactic with some fluidity, you have the right players to execute that tactic, you have healthy short lists so that you always have a lot of players under your microscope, and you have a happy team, you're going to win in Football Manager eventually, every time. I hope this helps. I'll see you on stream or another video. If you have any questions, the Discord, the stream, the comments section, all great places to go. If you want to check out one of those morale videos, this I probably think is the most important for FM22. That video is going to take you through the peculiarities of the transfer system. You should probably know that. See ya.